A dark, dirty Washington quarter hiding in an old change jar might look like nothing more than forgotten pocket money. But one tiny detail could completely change its story. A strange strike, unusual surface feature, rare variety, or genuine mint-made error could be exactly what makes an overlooked quarter worth a much closer look. Welcome back to Mint Vault USA, where we uncover valuable coins, rare varieties, surprising mint errors, and hidden treasures that could be sitting closer than you realize. In today's countdown, we're examining 4 Washington quarters that prove appearance can be incredibly misleading. Some have survived years of heavy circulation, while others show dark tunning, scratches, dirt, wear, and other signs of a long life in everyday use. But collectors know the real secret. Don't judge a coin by how worn or unattractive it looks. The smallest detail can sometimes be the most important. So before you spend those old quarters, check your coin jars, inherited collections, forgotten drawers, storage boxes, and loose change carefully. Look at the mint marks, lettering, edges, surfaces, and strikes, because the coin everyone else ignored could be the one you'll be glad you examined. Now let's start with the first coin. First up, the 1966 Washington quarter with no mint mark. At first glance, this coin may not look like the kind of quarter that deserves much attention. A heavily circulated example can appear dark, almost black, with worn details, surface scratches, grime, and decades of handling clearly visible across both sides. Many people would see that condition and immediately toss the coin back into a change jar. But collectors know there is a much more interesting story here, because the 1966 quarter was produced during one of the biggest changes in modern American coinage. And once you understand what was happening at the United States Mint during this period, you'll know why this is a coin worth examining carefully. The story takes us back to the middle of the 1960s. America was facing a serious coin shortage, silver prices were rising, and people were pulling older silver coins out of circulation. For decades, Washington quarters had contained silver, but continuing that composition was becoming increasingly difficult. The Coinage Act of 1965 changed everything. Regular quarters moved away from the traditional silver composition and began using copper-nickel outer layers bonded to a copper core. That places the 1966 quarter right in the middle of an important transition, when familiar American money was changing in a way millions of people could actually hold in their hands. But there is another detail that makes this coin especially interesting to beginners: the missing mint mark. Look around the date on a regular 1966 Washington quarter and you won't find a D, an S, or another mint mark. That can immediately make someone think they've discovered a rare missing mint mark error. But here's the important part. No mint mark is completely normal for a regular 1966 quarter. Mint marks were temporarily removed from circulating U.S. coins during this period as the government tried to reduce collecting pressure while increasing coin production. So the missing mint mark itself isn't the error collectors are searching for. And that's where the hunt really begins. Experienced collectors don't stop after noticing the missing mint mark. Instead, they examine the strike, lettering, edge, metal, and overall design, looking for something genuinely unusual that happened during production. That's the difference between simply owning an old quarter and possibly discovering a true mint-made error. Take a close look at the obverse. George Washington faces left, with Liberty above his portrait, In God We Trust beside him, and the date 1966 below. On a heavily circulated black example like the coin we're discussing, Washington's hair and facial details may appear smooth from years of wear. The open fields can show scratches, dark tunning, and grime, while the highest parts of the portrait may have lost much of their original sharpness. Now turn the quarter over. The reverse carries the familiar American eagle with its wings spread wide above a bundle of arrows, with olive branches below. United States of America curves around the upper portion, EPLUBUSUNUM appears above the eagle, and quarter dollar sits along the bottom. After decades of circulation, the eagle's feathers and other high points can become noticeably worn, but enough detail often remains to identify the design clearly. That dark or nearly black appearance can certainly make a 1966 quarter look mysterious, but don't let the color fool you. Dark tunning by itself does not make the coin rare. Years of moisture, dirt, chemicals, poor storage, and environmental exposure can turn a one-sprite quarter deep gray or almost black. Some coins develop uneven patches across the fields, while others become dark across nearly the entire surface. These changes may give the quarter plenty of character, but collectors still need something more important before serious rarity enters the picture. So this is where you become the detective. Start with the date. Place the coin beneath good lighting and examine the numbers carefully. If something appears doubled, distorted, or unusually thick, don't immediately assume you've found a doubled die. Decades of circulation can create scratches, flattened metal, grime, and other damage that sometimes imitate genuine mint errors. Move next to Liberty and In God We Trust. Slowly rotate the quarter beneath the light and watch the edges of each letter. You're looking for features that appear to be part of the original strike rather than damage added years later. Dirt trapped around letters can create strange shadows, while ordinary wear can change their shape. A true mint-made feature needs to make sense based on how the coin was produced. Then look at the entire position of the design. Is Washington properly centered? Does the rim appear normal all the way around, or does the design seem dramatically shifted toward one side? A genuine off-center strike can happen when the blank planchet isn't seated correctly when the dies strike. Part of the design may disappear beyond the edge, while another section of blank metal remains visible. The more dramatic and clearly mint-made the error is, while still leaving enough information to identify the coin, the more interesting it can become to specialist error collectors. Another possibility is a struck-through error. This occurs when foreign material gets between the die and planchet during striking. Depending on what caused the problem, an area of the finished coin can appear weak, recessed, incomplete, or strangely shaped. Grease or debris inside a die can also interfere with parts of the design. But once again, decades of circulation damage can sometimes produce a similar appearance, which is why careful authentication matters. Now, pay very close attention to the edge. This is where the history of the 1966 quarter becomes especially useful. A normal example should have the copper-nickel clad construction introduced after silver was removed from regular circulating quarters. Looking at the edge will normally reveal evidence of the copper-colored center between the outer layers. But suppose your coin looks completely different. Maybe the weight doesn't seem right. Maybe the thickness appears unusual. Perhaps the edge doesn't show the structure you expect, or the metal itself has a strange appearance that cannot easily be explained by tunning or environmental damage. That's when you stop guessing and start investigating. Never scrape the edge, cut into the coin, polish the surface, or use chemicals to test the metal. Those actions can permanently damage something that might deserve professional examination. Instead, carefully weigh the coin using an accurate scale and compare its physical characteristics with those expected for a normal 1966 quarter. If there is a meaningful difference, professional testing can determine whether you're dealing with ordinary damage or something far more interesting. And because we're dealing with a heavily circulated black coin, there's one temptation you absolutely need to avoid: cleaning it. You might look at the dark surface and think that toothpaste, vinegar, baking soda, metal polish, or a quick scrub would reveal a beautiful quarter underneath. Don't do it. Cleaning can remove original surface material and leave microscopic scratches across the coin. Even when the quarter appears brighter afterward, experienced collectors and professional graders may immediately recognize that the surfaces have been altered. Leave the coin exactly as you found it. Hold it carefully by the edges, protect it from moisture, and place it inside a suitable coin holder. The goal isn't to make an old quarter look brand new. The goal is to preserve whatever evidence remains on the coin so that it can be examined properly. Now imagine this scenario. You find a dark 1966 quarter inside an inherited collection. You already understand that the missing mint mark is normal, so that doesn't distract you. You inspect Washington's portrait, then the lettering, the reverse, and finally the edge. Something still doesn't look right. You place another normal 1966 quarter beside it, and suddenly the difference becomes much easier to see. Perhaps the strike is dramatically shifted. Perhaps part of the design shows a genuine mint-made abnormality. Or maybe the weight and metal characteristics simply don't match what a normal quarter should have. That's the moment when an ordinary coin hunt can become genuinely exciting. The errors that attract serious collectors are usually the ones that can be clearly identified, explained, and professionally authenticated. Collectors want to know exactly what happened during production and how unusual the resulting coin actually is. A dramatic mint error with strong visual appeal can create far greater demand than a normal 1966 quarter simply showing black tunning and heavy circulation. And now we come to the number that can make anyone stop and listen. A normal circulated 1966 Washington quarter isn't suddenly worth a fortune because it has no mint mark, and dark tunning doesn't automatically make it valuable either. But in the extreme dream scenario, imagine discovering an extraordinary 1966 quarter with a nearly unique, professionally authenticated major mint error. Perhaps an important wrong planchet strike, an unusual multiple strike, or another dramatic production mistake significant enough to attract elite error collectors. In a hypothetical top-tier situation like that, a headline valuation could climb toward an astonishing $485,000. Think about that for a moment. Nearly $500,000 connected to a quarter that someone could easily overlook because its surface looks old, dark, and heavily circulated. But keep the key distinction in mind. The missing mint mark would not create that kind of value. The black surface wouldn't create it either. It would take an extraordinary, genuine, extremely rare mint-made error backed by professional authentication and strong collector demand. If your 1966 quarter shows something that truly seems unusual, photograph the obverse, reverse, and edge clearly. Compare it with normal examples, and if the difference remains convincing, consider having it examined by an experienced error coin specialist. For potentially important pieces, professional authentication and grading through services such as PCGS or NGC can help establish exactly what the coin is. And don't rush to sell. First, determine what you're actually holding. Look at completed auction results for genuinely comparable certified errors rather than huge asking prices posted online. Anyone can list a coin for an unbelievable amount, but completed sales reveal what collectors have actually been willing to pay. If your coin turns out to be a significant authenticated error, a respected specialist dealer or established auction house may help place it in front of the collectors most likely to understand its importance. That's why the 1966 Washington quarter makes such a fascinating first coin in our countdown. It teaches us an important lesson right from the beginning. Never assume rarity from one detail alone. Don't focus only on the missing mint mark. Look deeper. Study the date, inspect the lettering, examine Washington's portrait, check the eagle, look carefully at the edge, and pay attention to the metal. Protect the original surface and allow real evidence to tell you whether you've found something unusual. This first coin may look like the kind of quarter most people would spend without a second thought, especially when it is heavily circulated, dark, and covered with years of dirt. But a 1984 D Washington quarter deserves a closer look before you drop it into a vending machine or toss it back into a change jar. The dark surface itself does not make the coin rare, but certain hidden minting characteristics can make the right example far more interesting to collectors. That is why you should never judge an old quarter only by its calc. Sometimes the important clue is small enough to remain unnoticed for decades. The story of this quarter takes us back to 1984, when Washington quarters were everywhere in American daily life. People used them in parking meters, pay phones, arcade machines, laundromats, and vending machines, so these coins were constantly moving from one pocket to another. The 1984 quarter was produced in large numbers to meet that everyday demand, and the example we are examining carries the D Mint mark, showing that it came from the Denver Mint. Because these quarters were made to circulate rather than sit inside collections, many surviving examples today show scratches, worn details, dark surfaces, and other signs of a long life in circulation. Take a close look at the front of the coin, and you will see the familiar portrait of George Washington. The word liberty appears above him. In God We Trust is placed beside the portrait, and the date 1984 appears near the bottom. The small D mint mark identifies the Denver Mint. On the reverse, the classic eagle spreads its wings above a bundle of arrows, with olive branches below. United States of America appears around the upper portion, while EPLURBUS UNUM and quarter dollar complete the design. It is a familiar appearance, which is exactly why unusual examples can be so easy to overlook. The 1984 D Washington quarter is a copper-nickel-clad coin rather than one of the older silver Washington quarters. Its outer layers contain copper and nickel, while the center is copper. On many normal examples, you can see a cup-colored band along the edge. This is an important detail for beginners because a quarter that turns black, gray, brown, or another unusual shade has not necessarily become valuable. Environmental exposure, moisture, chemicals, dirt, and decades of handling can change the appearance of a coin dramatically without creating rarity. Now imagine finding one of these quarters in heavily circulated black and dirty condition. Washington's hair has lost much of its sharp detail, the high points of the portrait are smooth, and the reverse eagle looks worn from years of use. Dirt may be sitting around the letters and close to the rim, while dark tunning covers much of the surface. Most people would see an unattractive old quarter and move on, but a collector knows that condition and rarity are two different things. A worn coin can still deserve attention if it contains a genuine mint-made feature that survived beneath all those years of circulation. This is where careful inspection becomes important. Start with the date and the D-mint mark, then slowly examine the lettering around Washington's portrait. Look at Liberty, In God We Trust, and the numbers in 1984 under good lighting and magnification. You are not simply searching for scratches or strange shapes. You are trying to determine whether anything unusual was created during the minting process. Damage that happened after the quarter entered circulation is very different from an error that happened while the coin was being produced. One feature that often gets collectors excited is apparent doubling. If parts of the date or lettering seem doubled, do not immediately assume you have found a valuable double-die variety. Ordinary wear, machine doubling, scratches, and other forms of damage can sometimes create a doubled appearance. A genuine doubled die has specific characteristics that experienced collectors and professional graders can identify. If the doubling appears strong, consistent, and connected to the original design rather than random surface damage, the coin may deserve further examination. The reverse deserves just as much attention. Study the eagle's wings, the arrows, the olive branches, and the lettering around the design. Look for areas that appear unusually weak, shifted, missing, or distorted, but remember that heavy circulation can remove fine details over time. A worn feather is not automatically an error, and a damaged letter is not automatically a rare variety. The important question is whether the unusual feature was created at the mint or happened later during the coin's long journey through circulation. Another dramatic possibility would be an off-center strike. This happens when the blank coin is not correctly positioned during the striking process, causing the design to appear shifted away from its normal location. Genuine off-center errors can attract strong collector attention, especially when the mistake is visually dramatic and enough identifying detail remains on the coin. However, a quarter that has been bent, crushed, cut, scraped, or damaged after leaving the mint is something completely different. The difference may look small to a beginner, but it can make an enormous difference to a serious collector. You should also examine the edge of the quarter carefully. A normal 1984 D-clad quarter should show the expected construction, but an unusual edge, weight, thickness, or metal appearance can sometimes give collectors a reason to investigate further. Never cut the coin, scrape the edge, or use chemicals to test it at home. If something genuinely seems wrong with the physical characteristics, Preserving the coin exactly as you found it gives an expert the best chance of determining what happened. Condition also plays a major role in the Washington quarter market. A heavily circulated coin has been handled and spent for years, so much of its original surface may be gone. An uncirculated example can retain stronger details and original mint luster, while coins at extremely high certified grades can become much harder to find. This is why two quarters carrying exactly the same year and mint mark can receive very different levels of collector attention. However, because the coin we are discussing is heavily circulated, its big money potential would need to come from something truly exceptional rather than simply from normal condition rarity. This is also where online coin hunting can become confusing. You may see ordinary-looking quarters offered online with enormous asking prices, sometimes enough to make anyone run toward their change jar. But an asking price is not proof that a coin has that value. Anyone can place an ambitious price on a listing. Serious collectors want evidence, including correct identification, professional authentication when needed, rarity, condition, and actual market demand. That is why the unusual feature on the coin matters far more than a dramatic number attached to an online advertisement. Now picture yourself holding this dark 1984 D quarter under a bright lamp. At first, it looks completely ordinary. You rotate it slowly, watching the light move across Washington's portrait and then across the eagle on the reverse. Suddenly, something catches your attention near the lettering or strike. You look again with magnification, and the feature still appears unusual. This is the moment when patience matters. Instead of immediately deciding that you have found a fortune, you compare the coin with normal examples and determine whether the difference could have happened during minting. If the feature appears significant, stop handling the coin more than necessary. Do not try to make that black surface shiny again. Cleaning an old quarter with metal polish, baking soda, chemicals, brushes, or abrasive cloth can leave permanent marks. Even gentle-looking cleaning can change the original surface in ways experienced collectors recognize quickly. That dark appearance may not add rarity, but removing it improperly can make the coin less desirable and can destroy important evidence around an unusual feature. Now we reach the part that makes people check every quarter in the house. Could a 1984 D Washington quarter ever become a serious big money discovery? An ordinary, heavily circulated example does not become a six-figure treasure simply because it is black or dirty. For a coin like this to enter an extraordinary value category, it would need something extraordinary to match, such as a spectacular authenticated mint error, an extremely important discovery, or a combination of characteristics rare enough to create intense competition among advanced collectors. In an exceptional hypothetical situation, imagine that a heavily circulated 1984 D quarter was professionally confirmed with a dramatic, previously unknown, nearly unique minting error. If the discovery were important enough and several major collectors wanted the same coin, a headline-making valuation could theoretically climb toward an astonishing $185,000. That number should not be treated as the normal market value of a 1984 D quarter. It represents the kind of extreme dream scenario that would require an extraordinary authenticated discovery, not dirt, ordinary damage, or common circulation wear. And that distinction is what makes searching old coins so fascinating. The quarter itself can look terrible while the important feature remains hidden in plain sight. Imagine somebody receiving this coin as change years ago, seeing its dark surface, and dropping it into a jar without looking at it again. The jar gets moved into a closet, then into a garage, and eventually forgotten. Decades later, someone pours those coins onto a table and notices the date. They see 1984, find the small D mint mark, and decide to examine the quarter instead of spending it. That simple decision to look more carefully is where every great coin hunt begins. You do not need to believe every quarter is valuable, and you should not assume every scratch is a mint error. Instead, train your eyes to notice differences. Compare suspicious coins with normal examples from the same year. Look at the placement of the design, the shape of the letters, the date, the mint mark, the edge, and the overall strike. The more normal coins you study, the easier it becomes to recognize something that truly does not belong. There is also something special about a heavily circulated coin that a perfect modern example cannot copy. A worn quarter has traveled. It may have crossed several states, passed through thousands of hands, sat inside cash registers, rolled beneath furniture, or disappeared into an old drawer for years. Every scratch and dark patch tells part of that journey. Most of those marks do not increase its monetary value, but they remind us why an important mint era can remain undiscovered for such a long time. People naturally pay less attention to coins that look worn and dirty. So if you have a black 1984 D Washington quarter, do not get excited simply because of the color, but do not dismiss it simply because it looks ugly either. Check the D mint mark, inspect the date, examine the major lettering, study the eagle, look at the strike, and carefully inspect the edge. If something appears genuinely different from a normal example, research that feature before doing anything to the surface. A few minutes of careful examination can tell you far more than the dirt ever will. And just imagine the feeling if an expert eventually confirmed that the strange feature you noticed was not circulation damage at all, but an extraordinary mint-made error. A coin that had been ignored because of its dark, heavily worn appearance could suddenly become the most interesting quarter in an entire collection. In the most extreme dream scenario, that is where a figure around $185,000 becomes exciting, but only when genuine rarity and professional authentication support the story. That is why the lesson of the 1984 D quarter is simple. Never confuse dirt with rarity, but never let dirt stop you from looking for rarity. Sometimes, the most interesting coin in the jar is not the brightest one. It may be the dark, worn quarter sitting quietly underneath everything else, waiting for somebody with enough curiosity to give it a second look. Now moving on to the next coin, we have the 1998 D Washington quarter in black and dirty condition. It comes from near the end of an important era for this classic quarter design, and the details collectors search for on this coin make the story even more interesting. Now moving on to the next coin, we come to a Washington quarter that many people still remember using in everyday change. It is the 1998 D Washington quarter, and when you find one covered with dark dirt or black tunning, it can be very easy to ignore. After all, 1998 does not sound like an ancient date, and the coin may look far too common to be exciting. But this quarter comes from an interesting moment in American coin history. And if the right unusual mint-made feature appears on the right example, collectors may give it much more attention than its worn appearance suggests. Think back to 1998 for a moment. Millions of Americans were still using cash for everyday purchases, and quarters were constantly moving through stores, parking meters, vending machines, laundromats, and arcade machines. At the same time, the familiar Washington quarter design was approaching the end of an era. The very next year, in 1999, the United States Mint would begin the famous 50-state quarters program. That major change brought new reverse designs into American pockets, but the 1998 quarter still carried the classic eagle reverse that people had known for decades. This makes 1998 an interesting final-year coin for collectors who enjoy the traditional Washington quarter design. The example we are talking about carries a D mint mark, and that little letter is important. The D tells you the coin was struck at the Denver Mint. When beginners first start searching quarters, they sometimes pay attention only to the year, but the mint mark helps identify exactly where a coin was produced. Coins from the same year but different mints can have different production numbers, different known varieties, and different levels of collector interest. So when you find a 1998 quarter, do not stop after reading the date. Look for that small D and make sure you know which coin you are actually examining. Now hold the quarter with George Washington facing you. Washington's portrait dominates the front of the coin, with liberty above his head and "In God We Trust" beside him. The date 1998 appears below, and the D mint mark identifies Denver. Flip the coin over, and you will see the classic American eagle with its wings spread wide. The eagle sits above a bundle of arrows, while olive branches appear below. Around the design are United States of America, EPLUBUSUNUM, and quarter dollar. To someone who used these quarters during the 1990s, the design may feel completely ordinary, but that familiar appearance can actually work against a rare era because people are less likely to stop and examine a coin they have seen thousands of times. The 1998 D quarter is a copper-nickel-clad coin, not a traditional silver quarter. If you look at the edge of a normal example, you can usually see the copper-colored center between the lighter outer layers. This construction is completely normal. However, after years of circulation, the surface can change dramatically. A quarter may become gray, brown, almost black, or covered with dirt around the letters and design. Sweat from hands, moisture, chemicals, storage conditions, and contact with other materials can all affect the surface over time. This is where our black and dirty 1998 D quarter enters the story. Imagine finding it inside an old jar that has not been opened for years. The coin is so dark that the date is difficult to read at first. Dirt has gathered around Washington's portrait, and the eagle on the back has a dull, almost lifeless appearance. Maybe there are scratches across the fields and small marks around the rim. It does not look beautiful, and it certainly does not look like the kind of coin someone would proudly display under bright lights. Still, before you decide that it is nothing special, there are several areas worth checking. Start by looking at the overall strike. Does everything appear centered where it should be? Does the rim look normal all the way around the coin? Are parts of the design unusually close to the edge on one side and farther away on the other? A genuine off-center strike happens during production when the blank is not positioned correctly between the dies. The farther the design is shifted, while still leaving useful identifying details, the more dramatic the error can become. A genuine example can be interesting to error collectors, but a coin that was damaged after leaving the mint is not the same thing. Next, study the lettering and the date with magnification. This part can become exciting because a strange-looking letter or number can immediately make you wonder whether you have discovered doubling. Look closely at 1998, Liberty, and In God We Trust. If you see what appears to be a second image beside a letter or number, compare it carefully with normal examples. True double die characteristics come from the die-making process. Machine doubling, heavy wear, dirt, and ordinary damage can also create strange shapes, so a doubled-looking area needs proper identification before you can call it a valuable variety. The D mint mark deserves attention as well, but do not assume every odd-looking D is rare. On a black and dirty quarter, material around the mint mark can change its appearance. A scratch can cut through it, wear can flatten part of it, and dark deposits can make the shape look thicker or thinner than it really is. This is why good lighting is so useful. Move the coin slowly under the light instead of staring at it from only one angle. Sometimes what looks like an extra piece of metal is simply dirt casting a tiny shadow. Now turn the coin over and spend some time with the eagle. The reverse has many design elements that can help you understand how strongly or weakly the coin was struck. Look at the wings, the breast area, the arrows, the olive branches, and the lettering. If something appears missing, weak, or strangely shaped, do not jump to conclusions. A filled die, sometimes called a grease-filled die, can cause parts of a design to appear weak or missing because material interfered with the die during striking. But heavy circulation can also wear away detail, especially on a quarter that has spent years moving through everyday commerce. Another area collectors may investigate is the coin's metal and edge. A normal 1998 D quarter should have the expected clad construction, size, and weight. If a coin seems very unusual in these areas, it may deserve more research. Sometimes people believe they have found a wrong planchet error because the color looks strange, but surface color alone is not enough. Environmental damage can produce very unusual colors. A genuine wrong planchet or other major metal-related error needs much stronger evidence, and professional authentication becomes especially important when the claim could significantly affect the coin's value. There are also striking errors that can look much more dramatic. A coin can sometimes be struck more than once, struck incorrectly, or show other unusual characteristics created during production. Major genuine errors are usually much easier to recognize than tiny random scratches, but identifying exactly what happened can still require expert knowledge. This is where collectors who specialize in mint errors become valuable. They understand how coins are produced, so they can often tell whether a strange feature is physically possible during the minting process or whether it happened after the coin entered circulation. Now there is something important about the condition of this particular quarter. Black dirt does not create rarity. In fact, serious surface problems can work against a coin when collectors evaluate it. If the quarter is heavily circulated, scratched, stained, or environmentally damaged, those problems usually matter. But a major genuine mint error can be a different story because collectors may want the coin for the error itself. Even then, condition still plays a role, but the rarity and visual strength of the error may become the main reason people are interested. This is why you should resist one very strong temptation: cleaning the coin. When people see a dirty quarter, the natural reaction is to make it look better. They may reach for soap, metal polish, baking soda, vinegar, a brush, or another household cleaner. Please do not do that if you think the coin could be collectible. Cleaning can leave tiny scratches, remove original surface material, change the color, and make the coin less attractive to experienced collectors. Even when a cleaned coin looks brighter to you, a grader may see the altered surface immediately. If dirt is hiding an important feature, the safest approach is still not to start scrubbing. Leave the coin as you found it and let an experienced coin dealer or professional grading service advise you. The dark surface may be ugly, but once you remove original material, you cannot put it back. A collector would rather examine an untouched dark coin than wonder what was destroyed by aggressive cleaning. With valuable coins, patience can protect both the evidence and the potential value. Now imagine you have been studying your 1998 D quarter for several minutes. You have compared it with normal pictures, and one feature still does not make sense. Perhaps the strike is dramatically shifted, or there is a clear mint-made feature that appears very different from ordinary damage. At that point, the coin becomes more than something you found in a jar. It becomes a question that needs an answer, and that question is exactly what makes coin collecting so addictive. You may be wondering about the big money possibility. Could a 1998 D quarter ever produce the kind of number that makes collectors stop and stare? A normal dark or dirty 1998 D quarter should never be treated like a huge treasure just because somebody places a giant asking price on one online. But imagine an extreme case where a 1998 D quarter is authenticated with a spectacular, nearly unique major mint error, something important enough to attract wealthy error collectors and create strong competition at auction. In that extraordinary dream situation, a headline valuation could theoretically reach around $240,000. Yes, imagine $240,000 connected to a quarter that someone almost spent for 25 cents. But keep the important word in mind: extraordinary. The black color does not create that value, and the D mint mark by itself does not create it either. A number at that level would require a truly exceptional discovery, professional authentication, strong collector demand, and the kind of rarity that separates one coin from the enormous number of ordinary quarters made for circulation. That is also why selling a potentially valuable coin should never begin with guessing. If you find a strange 1998 D quarter, first compare it with reliable examples and learn what kind of feature you may have. If it appears to be a major error or important variety, consider having it examined by a knowledgeable coin dealer. For a coin that could have serious collector value, professional grading and authentication from a respected service, such as PCGS or NGC, can give buyers much more confidence about what they are purchasing. Once the coin has been properly identified, you can think about where to sell it. A common coin may be handled through a local coin shop or collector marketplace, while a genuinely rare and valuable certified error may deserve attention from a major coin auction company. The right selling method depends on what the coin actually is. If you believe you have something important, do not rush into accepting the first offer simply because someone waves cash in front of you. Learn what you own, understand why collectors want it, and look at real completed sales of comparable authenticated coins whenever possible. This is especially important when using online marketplaces. You might see a seller asking thousands, tens of thousands, or even more for an ordinary-looking quarter. An asking price is simply what the seller hopes to receive. It is not proof of market value. Completed auction results are much more useful because they show what real buyers were willing to pay. Coin collecting becomes much safer when you learn to separate exciting advertisements from actual evidence. There is another reason the 1998 D quarter is fun to search. It sits right at the end of the classic eagle reverse era before the state quarters began in 1999. For many collectors, that gives 1998 a little extra historical personality. It represents the closing chapter of a design Americans had carried for decades. The following year, people began searching their change for different states, and suddenly quarters became a national collecting craze. The 1998 D was sitting right on the doorstep of that change. Think about how many of these older quarters may still be hiding today. Some are sitting in coffee cans, desk drawers, old banks, inherited collections, and forgotten boxes. Others may still appear in circulation from time to time. Most will be ordinary, and that is perfectly normal. Coin hunting is not about pretending every quarter is a fortune. It is about knowing that once in a while, an unusual coin can survive because nobody bothered to look closely. The black and dirty appearance can actually make the search more interesting. A shiny coin naturally attracts attention, while a dark coin often gets pushed aside. Imagine a 1998 D quarter sitting unnoticed at the bottom of a container for 15 or 20 years. Several people may have handled it without ever examining the strike. Then you pick it up, place it under a light, and notice something nobody else noticed. Whether the feature turns out to be valuable or not, that moment of discovery is part of the excitement collectors chase. So when you examine a 1998 D Washington quarter, slow down. Check the date and the D mint mark. Then study the lettering and the position of the design. Turn the coin over and inspect the eagle, arrows, olive branches, and rim. Look at the edge without scraping it. If you see possible doubling, a major off-center strike, missing design details, an unusual metal appearance, or another feature that seems mint-made, compare the coin with normal examples before making any decision. And most importantly, leave that dirty surface alone. A valuable error does not need to shine to be valuable. Its story is in how it was made, not in how bright you can make it afterward. Protect the coin, hold it by the edges when possible, keep it somewhere safe, and get another opinion if the unusual feature appears convincing. One careless cleaning session can take only minutes, but the changes it leaves on a coin can last forever. The 1998 D quarter reminds us that valuable discoveries do not always announce themselves. Sometimes they arrive looking dull, dark, and completely ordinary. The real excitement begins when one small detail refuses to match the thousands of normal coins around it. That detail can turn a quick glance into an hour of research, and in the most extraordinary cases, it can turn everyday pocket change into a coin that serious collectors want to compete for. And now we have reached the fourth and final coin in our countdown, and this is the one I want you to examine especially carefully. After everything we have already discovered, this last quarter proves why an old, dark, heavily circulated coin should never be judged only by its appearance. We are looking at the 1984 D Washington quarter, a coin that may be covered with dark tunning, dirt, scratches, and decades of wear. Most people would spend it without hesitation. But hidden beneath that rough surface could be the kind of unusual mint-made feature that makes an experienced collector stop immediately and take a much closer look. The story takes us back to 1984, when quarters were everywhere in American daily life. They disappeared into parking meters, pay phones, arcade machines, laundromats, vending machines, cash registers, and pockets across the country. These coins were never intended to sit untouched in expensive holders. They were working money, produced in huge quantities and expected to circulate constantly. A featured example carries the small D mint mark, telling us it was struck at the Denver Mint. And because so many 1984 D quarters entered everyday circulation, finding one with scratches, worn high points, dark surfaces, and contact marks is not surprising. In fact, that rough appearance is exactly what makes this final coin so easy to overlook. Look closely at the obverse, and you will see the familiar portrait of George Washington facing left. Liberty appears above his head, in God W.E. Trust sits beside the portrait, and the date 1984 is positioned below. Near Washington's hair is the small D mint mark identifying Denver. On a heavily circulated example, much of Washington's finer hair detail can become smooth, while years of contact with other coins leave scratches and marks across the open fields. Turn the coin over, and the familiar eagle appears with its wings spread above a bundle of arrows, with olive branches below. United States of America surrounds the upper design, EPLUBUSUNUM appears above the eagle, and $quarter identifies the denomination near the bottom. Because this design was so familiar to Americans, an unusual example could easily pass through thousands of hands without anyone noticing what made it different. And now we come to the condition of our featured coin. Imagine pulling a 1984 D quarter from an old jar and seeing a surface that is almost black. Dirt has collected around the lettering and rim. Washington's portrait has lost sharpness. The eagle's feathers have become smoother, and scratches cover parts of the fields. Your first reaction might be simple: this thing is ruined. But don't make that decision too quickly. Dark color does not automatically create rarity, but heavy circulation doesn't automatically eliminate the possibility of a valuable mint error either. Condition and rarity are two completely different questions. A worn quarter can still deserve serious examination if an important mint-made feature survived beneath all those years of circulation. Start your examination with the date and D mint mark. Use good lighting and, if possible, magnification. Slowly study the numbers in 1984, then move toward the mint mark and surrounding lettering. If something appears doubled, don't immediately celebrate. Apparent doubling is one of the easiest features for beginners to misidentify. Ordinary wear, scratches, machine doubling, displaced metal, and circulation damage can sometimes create the illusion of a doubled letter or number. A genuine double die variety has specific characteristics created before the coin was struck, and those characteristics need to be distinguished from damage that happened afterward. That difference can completely change the story of your coin. Now move to the reverse. Examine the eagle's wings, arrows, olive branches, and surrounding lettering. Look for areas that appear strangely shifted, missing, weak, or distorted. But remember, after decades of circulation, ordinary wear can remove a surprising amount of detail. A smooth feather isn't automatically an error, just as a damaged letter isn't automatically a rare variety. The real question is always the same. Did this happen at the mint, or did it happen after the coin entered circulation? That question becomes even more important when examining dramatic errors. Suppose the entire design appears shifted away from the center of the quarter. A genuine off-center strike occurs when the blank planchet isn't positioned correctly between the dies during striking. Instead of receiving the complete centered design, part of the coin can remain blank, while another portion of the design is pushed toward the edge. A dramatic, clearly genuine off-center error can be highly interesting to collectors, particularly when enough of the date and identifying details remain visible. But don't confuse that with a quarter that was bent, crushed, cut, scraped, or damaged after leaving the mint. To an inexperienced eye, strange damage can sometimes look exciting. To an experienced error specialist, the difference between post-mint damage and a genuine production mistake can be enormous. Next, inspect the edge. The normal 1984 D Washington quarter uses copper-nickel-clad construction, so the edge should show the expected layered appearance. If your quarter has an unusual weight, thickness, edge structure, or metal appearance, that could justify further investigation. But never scrape the edge. Never cut into the coin. And never use chemicals to test it. If the physical characteristics genuinely seem unusual, protect the coin exactly as it is, and allow an experienced specialist to determine whether you're seeing a real mint-related anomaly or simply environmental damage. This is also where condition becomes interesting. Most heavily circulated 1984 D quarters have lost much of their original mint luster. Compare one with a carefully preserved, uncirculated example, and the difference can be dramatic. An uncirculated coin may show stronger details, cleaner fields, and original mint brilliance. But our featured quarter is different. This is an old, dark, heavily circulated coin. So if a coin like this were ever going to attract truly serious money, ordinary condition wouldn't be the reason. It would need something much more important, something unusual enough to overcome all that circulation wear. And before we reveal just how dramatic that dream scenario could become, there is something every collector needs to understand about online prices. You may have seen ordinary quarters listed online for thousands, tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. Those numbers can look incredible, but an asking price is not the same thing as a completed sale. Anyone can list a coin for almost any amount. Serious collectors want evidence. They want correct identification, genuine rarity, professional authentication when appropriate, condition information, and real market demand. That's why you should never assume your quarter is worth a fortune simply because someone has placed an enormous price beside a similar-looking coin online. Now imagine you're sitting at your kitchen table with this black 1984D quarter beneath a bright lamp. You rotate it slowly. At first, nothing happens. Washington looks worn, the fields look dark, the reverse shows years of circulation. Then something catches your eye. Maybe it's near the date. Maybe it's around the D-mint mark. Maybe part of the strike doesn't line up the way you expected. You bring out magnification and look again. The feature is still there. Now your curiosity changes into something much more serious. Instead of assuming you've found a fortune, you compare the quarter with normal 1984D examples. You examine photographs. You study how the normal design should appear. And the more you compare, the stranger your coin begins to look. This is exactly where patience becomes one of the most valuable skills in coin collecting. And whatever you do next, do not clean the coin. That black surface may tempt you to reach for polish, vinegar, baking soda, a brush, or an abrasive cloth. Resist that temptation. Cleaning can permanently alter the surface, leave microscopic scratches, and remove evidence that an expert might need when studying an unusual feature. The dark appearance itself may not make your quarter rare, but destroying the original surface could make an interesting coin much less desirable. Now we finally reach the moment you've been waiting for. Could a heavily circulated 1984D Washington quarter ever become a serious, big-money discovery? For an ordinary example, simply being old, black, dirty, or worn would not create six-figure value. But imagine something completely different. Imagine a 1984D quarter that appears ordinary for decades until someone finally discovers an extraordinary mint-made characteristic. The coin is sent to specialists. It is studied carefully. The unusual feature isn't circulation damage. It isn't environmental corrosion. It isn't something created after the coin left Denver. Instead, experts confirm an extraordinary, nearly unique mint error. Now the entire story changes. In that extreme hypothetical situation, with a spectacular authenticated discovery and strong competition from advanced collectors, a headline valuation could theoretically climb toward an astonishing $185,000. Just imagine that number. $185,000. Connected to a quarter someone may have ignored for years because it looked too dark and worn to matter. But remember exactly what would need to create that kind of excitement. It wouldn't be the dirt. It wouldn't be ordinary scratches. It wouldn't be the D-mint mark by itself. It would require something truly extraordinary, genuinely mint-made, professionally authenticated, extremely rare, and desirable enough to make serious collectors compete for ownership. That's what makes this final coin such a powerful reminder of how deceptive appearances can be. Picture someone receiving this quarter as change years ago. They notice the black surface, assume it's nothing special, and drop it into an old glass jar. Years pass. The jar gets pushed into a cupboard, then moved into a garage. Eventually, it becomes part of an inherited box of old household items. One day, someone pours those coins across a table and notices a dark quarter near the bottom. A small D. Instead of spending it, they decide to look closer. That single decision is where every great coin hunt begins. You don't need to believe that every old quarter is valuable. You don't need to treat every scratch like a mint error. The real skill is learning what normal coins look like so that something truly abnormal becomes easier to recognize. Study the design placement. Look at the lettering. Check the date. Examine the mint mark. Inspect the edge. Compare the weight if something seems unusual. And most importantly, preserve the coin exactly as you found it. There is something fascinating about a heavily circulated quarter that even a perfect modern coin cannot reproduce. This piece has traveled. It may have crossed several states, passed through countless hands, disappeared inside vending machines, rested inside cash drawers, fallen beneath furniture, or remained forgotten inside someone's change jar for decades. Most of those scratches don't add monetary value, but they help explain something important: why an unusual mint error could remain undiscovered for so long. People naturally pay less attention to ugly coins. And sometimes that is exactly where the surprise can be hiding. So if you own a dark 1984 D Washington quarter, don't become excited simply because of its color, but don't throw it aside because of that color either. Examine it carefully, compare it with normal examples, and if something genuinely doesn't make sense, research the feature before touching the surface. Because just imagine the feeling if the feature you noticed was eventually confirmed as something that happened during production. A quarter ignored because of its dark, worn appearance could suddenly become the most fascinating coin in your collection. And in that extraordinary dream scenario, the possibility of a headline figure approaching $185,000 is exactly the kind of story that keeps collectors searching through old change year after year. And that brings us to the end of our top 4 coin countdown. If there is one lesson these 4 quarters should leave with you, it is this: never judge a coin too quickly. The brightest coin isn't always the most interesting, and the darkest coin isn't automatically worthless. Sometimes the detail that matters is so small that hundreds or even thousands of people can handle the coin without ever noticing it. So check those old jars, inherited collections, forgotten drawers, coin rolls, and boxes of change. Look carefully before you spend anything unusual. Never clean a coin you believe could be important, and let evidence rather than excitement guide your decisions. Because one of these 4 coins, or another overlooked quarter just like them, could already be sitting somewhere in your home, waiting for the right person to finally give it a second look.